All right, folks, we are now going to do the first page of the review. And we'd already gone over question one, but this objective is to recognize, simplify, and evaluate linear equations and functions. And in the first question, I'm asking you to identify the domain, which is just another name for the um, x variable, and the range, which is another name for the y variable. So when I go to list the domain on number one, I'm just going to list the x coordinates, and I'm just going to list them in the order that I see them. You could also list them in numerical order. And then the range are just my y coordinates. Now, in the question, is the relation a function? Number one is not a function, and the reason why it's not a function is because this x variable of 0 is appearing twice. So when I put my answer to complete sentence, I might write something like this. The relation is not a function because x coordinates repeat. All right, for number two, doing the same thing. My domain are all the x coordinates, and if you notice, they are different, and my range are the y coordinates. And so is this a function? Yes, this is a function because all of the x coordinates are different. All right, and that is domain, range, and is it a function or not? Now just remember, we did talk about more with domain, and we talked about those three cases. Is x in the numerator, is x in the, I'm sorry, is x in the denominator, is x in an even root, or both? So keep that in mind as you work through this, even though there wasn't a question asked about it. Draw a relation. I'm just going to draw a picture that would not pass the vertical line test. That wouldn't pass the vertical line test. And again, just kind of factoring in, going back to number one, why isn't this a function? When I do the vertical line test and it's hitting these points, the x coordinates are repeating. So that one might be 1, 5, and this one might be 1, negative 2. And it's because that these x coordinates of 1 are repeating that it's not a function. So draw a function, I can just draw a line. This passes the vertical line test. Every x coordinate is different. So what makes 2 be a function? Every x coordinate is different, or this is a function because it passes the vertical line test. And I'm going to abbreviate vertical line test. Remember VLT. Okay? On 3 and 4, you're asked to evaluate. So when you evaluate, you're evaluating negative 4, and you're evaluating it in this function. So it's just a matter of putting negative 4 in for x and following the order of operations. So when I do the order of operations here, I'm actually going to divide negative 4 and 4 and get negative 1. And when I multiply that with negative 3, I end up with 3, and then I add 2, and my answer is 5. So my function, when I make x be negative 4, I get 5. Okay? Next one, I'm going to evaluate the function as well, and I'm going to put 3 into this function. And again, I'm going to follow the order of operations. Now, somebody asked me yesterday, what if it had been negative 3? Don't always rely on your calculator because 3 squared or negative 3 squared is 9. And if you type it into your calculator incorrectly, that is the negative 3 squared, it will give you negative 9. So just a heads up on that. So I get 9. After that, I'm supposed to multiply, and I get 18. So at this point, I'm at 18 plus 3 is 21. So my function, if I make x be 3, is worth 21. On 5 and 6, I am just asking you to evaluate, simplify. So I'm just cleaning this up. And again, my word or My suggestion is add the opposite first, and then I'm going to simplify. So my first step is to distribute. I'm going to draw those underneath. Distribute the 2 to both things, and you get 2x squared plus 10. And then distribute the negative 3 to both things, and you get negative 21 plus 3x squared. And now I'm going to combine my like terms. I have a total of 5x squareds. I'm going to cross those off now. And then when I add my constants, which is just the number that has no variable with it, I get negative 11. You could put minus 11, you could put negative 11 first, that doesn't matter. So same idea on number 6. I'm going to add the opposite first. I'm going to distribute. And so as I rewrite what I have, when I distribute that 5 in, I get 5x cubed plus negative 40. And now I'm ready to combine my like terms. So I start with my x cubes, and I have 9 of them. I'm going to cross those off now. And I only have one thing that has an x. I have 7 x's. Cross that off. And the last thing that's left is my constant. And again, technically these can be written in any order, but this is called standard form, which means the highest power goes first, then the next highest with the constant being last. So that's the more traditional or standard way of seeing it. And that's the first objective. All right, we're going to finish the second objective, so we're doing the first page of it. So starting with number 7, they ask me to find the slope. And when I find the slope, instead of subtracting my y's and my x's, I'm actually just going to count my rise and my run. So my rise, I'm going up 4 spots. And my run, I'm going over, there's 5. Here's another 4, so I'm going over 9. You just have to make sure that when you're done, should it be a positive or a negative slope, and this is negative. And that's the downfall of counting the rise or the run. It won't get that negative. That's something that you have to remember to do. On 8, I'm writing the equation, so it's y equals mx plus b. This time I'm going to use the points slope formula, but first I need to find my slope. So I'm going to subtract my y's, and I choose to go 3 minus negative 9. And notice, guys, I'm writing this out, because when I do, I have a better chance of catching any mistakes, and I'll realize that it's really 3 plus 9. And that means I'm going to subtract my x's the same way. Going to add the opposite, and I get 7. So I'm halfway to my answer. It's y equals 12 sevenths. And actually, I am going to use the y equals mx plus b on this one. But here's the start of my answer. And for y, I'm going to use the 2 and 3 because I'd rather use positive numbers than negative numbers. And for y goes 3. And for m is my 12 sevenths. I'm going to take that times 2 and then add b. So when I go through the math here, I'm going to take 12 sevenths times 2, which you can do on your calculator. That's totally fine to do. But when I get that answer, I'm going to turn it into the decimal, and I'm just going to turn it into 3.4. And now to get b by itself, I'd subtract the 3.4, which is going to make b be worth negative 0.4. And now I can go back up to my answer spot and put it in there. Okay. All right, number 9, decide whether line 1, it should be and line 2 are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. And that's all based, again, on slope. If the slopes are the same, they're parallel. If they're opposites and reciprocals, they're perpendicular. And if none of those cases are happening, then they're neither. It means the lines will meet, but just not at a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to start with line 1, slope 1. And I'm going to do negative 7 minus negative 2. So when I go for the x's, same way. I'm going to add the opposite. And when I'm done, for slope 1, I get negative 5/3. For slope 2, same thing, subtract my y. So I'm going to do 2 minus negative 3 this time. And that means I'm going to take negative 9 minus negative 6. I'm going to add the opposite. And when I'm done, I get 5 over negative 3. And it doesn't matter where the negative is. They're both negative 5/3 slope. And that means they're the same, so that means the lines are parallel. So the lines are parallel. Because they have the same slope. And I can put the actual slope in there, negative 5/3. Okay, let's go back up to the top of the page and take a look at number 10. So on Friday, you left for a weekend camping trip with 110 miles on the odometer and 14 and a half gallons of gas in the tank of water, in the tank of your car. When you returned on Sunday, the odometer read 299 miles and you still had 7.5 gallons of gas left. How many miles per gallon did you average? Average is just slope. The thing is, you have to decide what's going to be X and what's going to be Y, or rather, what's your independent or your dependent. And if you look at it, they actually even tell you it's miles per gallon. So if I wrote that as a fraction, miles per gallon, that would mean my miles are my Y and my X are my gallons. The number of miles I go depends on how many gallons of gas I have. So if I write this as XY coordinates, I have 14.5 with 110, and then I have 7.5 with 299. So I'm going to subtract my Y's, and I'm going to subtract my X's the same way, and I get 189 over 7. So that's how many miles I can go with 7 gallons of gas. I want to know per 1 gallon. So I'm going to divide them. And when I divide 189 by my negative 7, I get negative 27. And that negative just means that it's going down. So when I write my answer, I'll actually leave the negative off. So I average 27 miles per gallon on my camping trip. So 11 is the same way. In 2000, the population in the local rate was 32%. In the current year, the population is now 65%. If this change happened at a steady or average rate, again, that just means slope, how much, uh, and I'll have to fix this, how much did the pollution increase by each year? Um, so again, I told you guys at one point, time is always independent. So in the year 2000, it was at 32%. And in the current year, so we're looking at 2012, it is 65%. So if I just subtract my y's over my x's, 12 years have gone by and my pollution rate is at um, 33. So now I'm going to divide them because that's how much it's changed in 12 years. I want to know per year. So when I divide, I get 2.75. So the pollution increased at an average rate of 2.75% per year. All right, let's go to 12. We're writing another equation. This time I will use the point slope. And that just says you take y minus the y coordinate, and that would equal the slope with x minus the x coordinate. I am going to add the opposite first on everything. And now I'm ready to do my two steps. The first step is to distribute my negative 2 through. So I get negative 2x plus 4. And then my second step is to get y by itself, so I either add or subtract. So when I subtract 1, my slope or my equation ends up being negative 2x plus 3. And that's it. That is the first page. The second page has already been done for you. And we'll see you on test day. Bye.